The soft murmur of conversations filled the air inside an upscale New York cafe. Waiters rushed around with trays, serving hot coffee to businessmen in suits. In a quiet corner, an elderly man sat alone, staring at his untouched coffee, his hands trembling. His eyes were red, filled with sadness, yet no one seemed to notice. At that moment, the cafe door opened, and in walked Barron Trump. He was used to attention, but today his focus was elsewhere. As he scanned the cafe, his eyes landed on the old man. Something about the way he sat, lost in his own pain, made Barron pause. Just then, the man lifted his hand, revealing an old photograph tucked inside his palm. He sighed deeply, and before Barron could even process it, a single tear slipped down the man's cheek. But before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments, and if you love stories like this, hit that subscribe button, so you never miss one. Now, let's get back to what happened next. Barron walked over and sat down across from the man without saying a word. The old man looked up, surprised. No one had spoken to him all morning. "Are you all right?" Barron finally asked. The man hesitated before sliding the photograph across the table. Barron picked it up and saw a young soldier in uniform, standing proudly. The resemblance was clear. The soldier was the same man sitting before him, but years had passed. Barron frowned. "You served?" The old man nodded. His voice was barely a whisper. "I gave everything for this country, but today, I feel forgotten." Barron remained silent, processing the weight of those words. What he said next changed everything. Barron leaned forward. "You're not forgotten." His voice was firm, filled with a quiet intensity. "People just need a reminder of who you are." Before the old man could respond, Barron pulled out his phone and dialed a number. The entire cafe watched in stunned silence. Moments later, the cafe doors burst open. 4 men in uniform stepped inside. The old man gasped as the soldiers walked toward him, their expressions unreadable. Then, in perfect sync, they stood at attention and saluted him. One of the soldiers stepped forward and spoke with deep respect. "Sir, we owe you everything." Tears welled up in the old man's eyes, but before he could react, Barron stood up and made an announcement that shocked the entire cafe. Barron turned toward the customers. His voice was steady but commanding. "Do you know who this man is?" The room fell silent. This man fought for this country, and yet today he sits alone, unnoticed. That changes now. A waiter, visibly emotional, rushed forward and placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of the old man. Then, one by one, people started to stand up and clap. Some shook the veteran's hand. Others simply placed their hands over their hearts. A woman in the back began to cry. Barron watched quietly. He had done what he came for, but before leaving, he reached into his jacket and pulled something out. A military honor medal. The old man's hands trembled as Barron placed it gently in front of him. "You are not forgotten. Never again." The old man looked up, overwhelmed, but just when he thought it was over, the biggest surprise was yet to come. That night, a video surfaced online that took the internet by storm. The same homeless boy, now dressed in clean, well-fitted clothes, stood on a brightly lit stage. His shoulders no longer hunched, his voice no longer hesitant. He stood before a packed hall of wealthy businessmen, investors, and executives, the same kind of people who once ignored him on the street. It was an exclusive Trump Foundation event, and Barron Trump was standing right beside him. The audience watched as the boy took a deep breath. He looked straight ahead, then spoke with confidence. "All I needed was one chance, and someone who believed in me." The hall erupted in applause. But then, the most unexpected moment happened. Barron reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. The same photograph the boy had been holding when they first met. He unfolded it carefully and held it up for the audience to see. Never forget where you started. The room fell silent for a moment before the sound of thunderous applause filled the air. This wasn't just a story about wealth. This was a story about opportunity, about change, about hope. And if you believe in hope too, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story like this.